If you've ever climbed in the Tetons, if you've ever stood on one of those jagged peaks and looked down at the valley floor 3,000 feet below while the wind tried to rip you off the mountain, leave a comment and tell me if you felt it. That presence, that feeling of something ancient watching you from inside the ice, something that doesn't want you there, something that's been collecting climbers for longer than anyone knows. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications, because what I'm about to tell you has been my family's burden for 3 generations. And after what we found last October, I don't think I can carry it alone anymore. My name is Nathan Cole. I'm 42 years old, and I've been a park ranger at Grand Teton National Park for 18 years. Before that, I was a climbing guide. Before that, I was a ski patroller. I've spent my entire adult life in these mountains, and I thought I understood them. I thought I knew every ridge, every couloir, every hidden crevasse where the ice never melts even in August. I was wrong. There are places in the Tetons that don't appear on any map. Places where the mountain itself seems to breathe. Places where climbers go up and never come down. At least, not in any way that makes sense. Grand Teton National Park covers over 300,000 acres in northwestern Wyoming, just south of Yellowstone. The Teton Range rises abruptly from the valley floor. No foothills, no gradual approach, just a wall of jagged granite peaks that shoot nearly 7,000 feet straight up like teeth biting at the sky. Geologists call it a fault block mountain range, formed when enormous slabs of rock tilted upward along a crack in the Earth's crust. The result is one of the youngest and most dramatic mountain ranges in North America, peaks that look like they were designed to kill you. The Grand Teton itself stands at 13,775 feet, the second highest peak in Wyoming. Every year, thousands of climbers attempt to summit it. They come from all over the world, drawn by the challenge, the beauty, the bragging rights. Most succeed. The standard routes are well established, with fixed anchors and clear paths beaten into the rock by decades of traffic. But some don't make it. Some fall. Some get caught in storms. Some simply vanish, swallowed by the mountain as if they never existed. And a few become part of the mountain in ways that defy everything we think we know about death. Ways that my family has been documenting for 3 generations. Ways that I've seen with my own eyes and still can't fully explain. My grandfather, William Cole, came to the Tetons in 1952 as part of a rescue team searching for 2 climbers who'd gone missing on the north face of the Grand. The north face is the deadliest route on the mountain, a sheer wall of ice and rock that doesn't forgive mistakes. Even experienced climbers approach it with respect, and that year, 2 young men from a climbing club in Denver had decided to attempt it without proper preparation. They'd been missing for 6 days when my grandfather's team finally found them. They were wedged in a crevasse at 12,000 feet. A narrow crack in the glacier that had trapped them like insects in amber. Both men were frozen solid, preserved perfectly by the ice. Their faces were peaceful, almost serene, as if they'd simply fallen asleep and never woken up. No signs of struggle, no evidence of panic, no indication that they'd tried to escape or call for help. Just 2 bodies, frozen in place, waiting to be found. But here's the thing that made my grandfather quit the rescue team and never climb again. The thing he wrote about in his journal and never spoke of to anyone outside the family. When they brought the bodies down, one of them opened his eyes. Not a muscle spasm, not a reflex, not the kind of posthumous twitching that happens when frozen tissue starts to thaw. The man, his name was Robert Hendricks, 23 years old, an engineering student with his whole life ahead of him, had been frozen for 6 days in temperatures that would kill exposed flesh in minutes. His core temperature, when they finally got him to a hospital in Jackson, was 42 degrees Fahrenheit. That's 12 degrees below the point where the human heart stops beating. His blood should have been sludge. His brain should have been dead for days. But his eyes opened. They tracked the movement of the doctors. His pupils dilated in response to light, and his lips moved, trying to form words that no one could hear except my grandfather, who was standing at his bedside because he couldn't bring himself to leave. He died, really died, 3 hours later. But before he went, he managed to whisper one sentence to my grandfather, who was standing at his bedside. It keeps us alive, until it's ready. My grandfather never told anyone else what he heard. He wrote it in his journal, the same journal that now sits in my cabin, filled with 3 generations of observations, incidents, and rules. Rules that my father taught me when I became a ranger. Rules that I'll teach my son when he's old enough to understand. Rule number 1. Never conduct rescue operations above 11,500 feet after sunset. If climbers are stranded overnight at that elevation, wait until dawn. They're either dead or they're not, and if they're not dead, waiting a few more hours won't matter to whatever's keeping them alive. Rule number 2. If you find a body that's frozen but shows no signs of frostbite, don't touch it with bare skin. Use equipment only, report it as a standard recovery and process it through normal channels, but never be alone with it. Rule number 3. The ice caves on the north face of Mount Owen are permanently off limits. Any climber who asks about them should be told they don't exist. Any climber who claims to have seen them should be escorted out of the park immediately. Rule number 4. During the winter solstice, a coal must climb to the enclosure on the Grand Teton and leave the offering. This has been done every year since 1953. This cannot be skipped. This cannot be delegated. Rule number 5. If a recovered body thaws and shows any sign of movement, any sign at all, inject the syringe from the emergency kit directly into the heart. Don't hesitate. Don't wait for confirmation. What wakes up won't be the person who went up the mountain. Rule number 6. Trust the cold. The cold is the only thing keeping them contained. The glaciers are the prison walls, the ice is the lock, and as long as the temperatures stay below freezing at that elevation, as long as the ancient ice remains intact, the collection stays dormant. But climate change is real, and the glaciers are shrinking. And every year the summer melt line creeps a little higher up the mountain. If the permanent ice starts to melt, there is no rule for that. There's only prayer. There's only hope that someone, somewhere, figures out a new way to keep the mountain satisfied before it wakes up and takes what it wants. I've followed these rules for 18 years. I've made the solstice climb every December, even in blizzards that should have killed me. Even when the wind chill dropped to 60 below and my fingers went numb inside 3 layers of gloves. I've recovered bodies that felt wrong, too warm, too flexible, too alive despite being clinically dead for hours or days or weeks. I've seen eyes open in faces that should have been frozen solid. I've heard whispers from lips that had no breath to form them. I've used the syringe twice, and both times I told myself it was just muscle spasms, just the body releasing trapped gases, just my imagination running wild in the thin mountain air. I've buried those bodies deeper than protocol requires, in places where no one will ever find them. I've written reports that were carefully worded lies, documenting accidents and natural deaths that were anything but. I told myself a lot of things over the years. It was easier than accepting the truth. Easier than admitting that my grandfather's journal was more than family history. Easier than believing that the mountain was alive and hungry and patient. Then came last October. Then came Dr. Marcus Webb and his team of researchers and his drilling equipment. And then came the moment when I couldn't lie to myself anymore, when I had to face what I'd always known but never wanted to admit. Dr. Marcus Webb was a glaciologist from the University of Colorado, specializing in what he called permanent ice formations, glaciers and ice fields that had remained frozen for thousands of years, even as the climate warmed around them. He arrived at Grand Teton in early October with a research permit, a team of 3 graduate students, and enough drilling equipment to punch holes in solid granite. His target was the Teton Glacier, one of the few remaining glaciers in the park. It had been shrinking for decades, down from over 800 acres in the 1960s to less than 200 acres today. Webb wanted to extract ice cores from its deepest sections before it disappeared entirely. He said the ice might contain atmospheric data going back 10,000 years, air bubbles trapped when mammoths still walked the earth, a frozen record of climate history that would be lost forever if we didn't act now. It sounded reasonable. It sounded scientific. It sounded like exactly the kind of research the Park Service should support. But something about Webb made me uneasy from the moment I met him. He was maybe 55, with gray hair cropped short and eyes that held the kind of intensity you see in people who've dedicated their lives to a single obsession. He asked too many questions about the mountain's history, about climbing accidents, about bodies that had been recovered, about bodies that hadn't. "I've read some interesting accounts," he told me during our first meeting, spreading maps across the table in the ranger station. Climbers found frozen solid who showed signs of life when they were brought down. Is there any truth to those stories? Mountain folklore, I said, keeping my voice steady. Altitude does strange things to people's perceptions. Cold does strange things to bodies. Put them together and you get stories that grow with each retelling. Webb studied me with those intense eyes. The accounts I found were from medical professionals, doctors, paramedics. Not exactly prone to folklore, wouldn't you say? What exactly are you researching, Dr. Webb? Ice cores or ghost stories? He smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. Why can't it be both? The ice preserves everything, Ranger Cole. Everything. And I intend to find out exactly what that means. I should have denied his permits right then. I should have invented some environmental concern, some endangered species, some bureaucratic obstacle that would send him back to Colorado empty-handed. I've done it before, buried permit applications in paperwork, requested unnecessary environmental impact studies, invented maintenance issues that required areas to be closed. My father taught me all the tricks. His father taught him. We have over 70 years of experience in keeping people away from places they shouldn't go. But Webb's paperwork was perfect. His funding came from the National Science Foundation, about as legitimate as it gets. His university had connections to senators and congressmen who could make life difficult for a park ranger who obstructed legitimate research. And the Park Service Regional Office had already approved his proposal with enthusiasm, seeing it as exactly the kind of high-profile scientific work that justified their budgets. All I could do was watch, and wait, and hope that whatever he found in that ice would stay frozen. Hope that whatever was up there would stay asleep. My son Danny was 19 that October, taking a gap year before college to work as a seasonal ranger at the park. He was the 4th generation of Coles in the Tetons, the one who would eventually inherit the journal, the rules, the burden that our family had carried since 1952. I'd been introducing him to the truth slowly, the way my father had introduced me, the way his father had introduced him. Danny knew about the strange incidents. I'd let him read some of the journal entries, the ones that weren't too disturbing. He knew about the solstice offerings, had watched me prepare them since he was old enough to understand that some things are done without explanation. He knew about the rules, had memorized them the way other kids memorize prayers or multiplication tables, but he didn't fully understand yet. He thought it was tradition, ritual, maybe even superstition passed down from his great-grandfather. The kind of family quirk that makes for interesting dinner party conversation but doesn't really mean anything in the modern world. He was about to learn that tradition and superstition are often just words we use for truths we're not ready to accept. He was about to learn that his family's burden was real and heavy and would be his to carry sooner than any of us expected. 2 weeks into his research, Webb requested permission to extend his drilling operations to a section of the glacier that was technically outside his permitted area. It was higher up, he said. The ice was older. The data would be more valuable. The section he wanted was directly below Mount Owen, directly above the ice caves that didn't officially exist. "That area is restricted," I told him. "Unstable ice. Risk of collapse. I've done seismic surveys. The ice is perfectly stable. The surveys are wrong. Ranger Cole." Webb leaned forward across my desk. "I've been doing this work for 30 years. I've drilled in Antarctica, Greenland, the Himalayas. I know stable ice when I see it, and I know when someone is hiding something." He paused. "What's really up there? What are you so afraid of me finding?" I met his gaze and held it. "Nothing you want to see, Dr. Webb. Trust me on that." He left my office without another word, but I knew it wasn't over. Men like Webb didn't accept no for an answer. They found ways around obstacles. They pushed boundaries. They convinced themselves that the rules didn't apply to them because their work was too important. 3 days later, I got a call from Danny. His voice was shaking. "Dad, you need to get up here. Webb's team found something. They drilled into a cavity in the ice. Some kind of cave, and there's people in it." My blood went cold. "What do you mean, people?" "Bodies. At least a dozen of them. Frozen in the ice. But Dad..." Danny's voice cracked. "One of them moved. I saw it. One of them opened its eyes." I made the climb faster than I'd ever made it before, pushing through exhaustion and thin air with the kind of desperate energy that only fear can provide. Danny met me at Webb's base camp, his face pale and his hands still trembling. "Where's Webb?" I demanded. "Still up there. He won't leave. He's documenting everything, taking samples, photographs." Danny grabbed my arm. "Dad, what the hell is going on? Those bodies, they're not natural. They're preserved perfectly. No ice damage, no decomposition. Some of them look like they just fell asleep. Did anyone touch them? With bare skin?" I don't think so. We were all wearing gloves because of the cold." "Good. Keep it that way." I started toward the glacier, then stopped and turned back. "Danny, listen to me. Whatever you see up there, whatever happens, you stay behind me. You don't touch anything. And if I tell you to run, you run. Don't look back. Don't hesitate. Just get off this mountain as fast as you can. Understand?" He nodded, his eyes wide with fear and confusion. He was finally starting to understand that this wasn't folklore. This wasn't tradition. This was real, and it was dangerous, and everything I'd been preparing him for his entire life was about to become terrifyingly relevant. The cavity Webb had drilled into was larger than I expected, an opening about 6 feet wide that led into a cave system carved into the heart of the glacier. The walls weren't rough like natural ice formations. They were smooth, almost polished, as if something had deliberately hollowed out this space over centuries or millennia. And they glowed with a strange blue light, not from any external source, but from the ice itself, as if it contained some bioluminescent organism or absorbed ambient radiation in ways that normal ice didn't. The temperature inside was wrong too. It should have been well below freezing. We were inside a glacier, after all. But the air felt almost comfortable. Maybe 40 degrees, maybe warmer. The kind of temperature that would have been impossible to maintain naturally, that would require some kind of constant energy input to prevent the cave from freezing solid. Something was generating heat in here. Something was keeping this space open, habitable, ready. Webb was inside with his 2 remaining graduate students. The third, I learned later, had taken one look at what was in the cave and fled back to base camp without a word. She was on a flight back to Colorado by the next morning and dropped out of the program entirely within a month. Smart kid. Smarter than her professor. Smarter than all of us. Ranger Cole. Webb's voice echoed off the ice walls as I entered. He was standing in front of a row of, I don't know what else to call them, but bodies. Human bodies. Frozen into the ice in various positions. Some standing upright. Some curled into fetal positions. Some reaching out with arms extended, fingers spread, as if grasping for something that wasn't there. Come to shut down my research? This isn't research anymore, I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. This is a crime scene. These are human remains. They need to be recovered properly, identified, returned to their families. Recovered. Webb laughed, a high, unstable sound that echoed off the ice. Ranger Cole, some of these bodies are wearing clothing from the 1800s. Some of them are in buckskins and furs that predate European settlement of this region. And they're all perfectly preserved. No decomposition, no ice crystal damage. It's as if they froze instantly and then stopped. Stopped aging. Stopped decaying. Stopped dying. He walked along the row of frozen figures, his flashlight beam playing across their faces. There were more than a dozen of them. I counted at least 18, arranged in a rough semicircle around the back of the cave like an audience waiting for a performance. Some of them I recognized from missing person reports going back decades. Edward Thorpe, who vanished on a solo climb in 1987. His wife had called the station every year for 15 years, asking if we'd found any trace of him. Sarah Chen, lost in a blizzard in 1999. Her parents still maintained a memorial page online, begging for information. The Halverson brothers, who attempted the North Face in 2003 and were never found, their climbing partners had reported hearing them call for help on the radio. Then nothing. But there were older ones, too. Much older. A man in wool clothing and leather boots that looked like something from the early 1900s. A woman in a long dress that might have been Victorian, her hair still pinned up in a style that hadn't been fashionable for 100 years. And further back, deeper in the shadows, figures in furs and hides that predated European settlement entirely, people who had climbed these mountains before they even had a name. All of them frozen, all of them perfectly preserved. No decay, no ice crystal damage, no sign that time had touched them at all. And all of them, I realized with a sick, creeping horror, with their eyes slightly open, not fully closed in death, not staring blankly, just slightly open, watching, waiting. They're not dead, Webb whispered. That's what you've been hiding, isn't it? They're not dead. They're suspended, waiting. You need to stop talking and start leaving, I said. Right now, before... The ice groaned, a deep, resonant sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The blue glow intensified, pulsing slowly, rhythmically, like a heartbeat. Before what? Webb's eyes were shining with manic excitement. Before the Guardian wakes up? Before whatever's been keeping these people alive decides to add us to its collection? He spread his arms wide. I've read the accounts, Cole. I've traced the stories back centuries. The native tribes knew about this place. They called it the mountain that keeps. They said it was a doorway to something else. Something that exists outside of normal time. Something that feeds on the boundary between life and death. The groaning stopped. The silence that followed was worse. We need to leave, I said. Now. All of us. I'm not going anywhere. Webb pulled out a small device, a thermal probe, I realized. I need samples. I need data. I need to understand how this works. He pressed the probe against the ice near one of the frozen bodies. A man in climbing gear from maybe the 1960s. His face peaceful, his eyes half-lidded, his lips slightly parted as if about to speak. The moment the probe touched the ice, the man's eyes snapped fully open. They weren't human eyes anymore. They were blue, the same blue as the glowing ice, and they held an intelligence that was vast and cold and utterly alien. The man's mouth opened wider, and a sound came out. Not words. A frequency. A vibration that I felt in my teeth, in my bones, in the deepest part of my brain where human instinct still remembered what it was like to be prey. All around us, the other bodies began to move. Slow, jerky movements, like puppets being tested after years of storage. Eyes opening, fingers twitching, mouths gaping in silent screams that weren't screams at all, but something worse. Something that sounded almost like laughter. "Run!" I grabbed Danny and shoved him toward the entrance. Webb's graduate students were already gone, fled into the ice tunnel with the instinct of animals escaping a forest fire. But Webb himself stood transfixed, staring at the waking bodies with an expression of rapturous wonder. "It's beautiful," he whispered. "It's perfect. They're all connected. One organism, one consciousness. The mountain itself is alive, and these are its cells, its memories, its—" The man from the 1960s reached out and touched Webb's face. Just a touch. Gentle, almost tender, the way a parent might touch a sleeping child. Webb's words cut off mid-sentence. His expression went slack, his eyes losing focus, his mouth falling open in something that might have been surprise or might have been ecstasy. Frost began to form on his skin, spreading outward from the point of contact like cracks in a windshield. It moved fast, faster than any natural process should allow, racing across his cheeks, down his neck, under his collar. His clothing stiffened, his hair frosted over. His skin took on that blue-white pallor that I'd seen on recovered bodies too many times to count. His eyes went blue, that terrible glowing blue that matched the ice, that matched the eyes of all the frozen figures around us. And he smiled, a beatific smile, the smile of someone experiencing something wonderful, something transcendent, something worth dying for. "It's so warm," he said. His voice was different now, layered, harmonic, as if multiple people were speaking through his throat at once. "It's so warm inside the ice. It knows everything. It remembers everything. It's been waiting so long for someone who would understand." Then he stopped moving, stopped breathing, stopped being Marcus Webb and became something else. Another figure in the collection, another voice in the chorus, another cell in whatever vast organism lived inside the mountain. I didn't wait to see more. I grabbed Danny's arm and ran. We ran. Through the ice tunnel, out into the blinding white of the glacier, down the mountain with a speed born of pure terror. I didn't look back. I couldn't look back. I could hear the ice groaning behind us, shifting, reforming, the cave sealing itself up as if it had never existed, as if the mountain was swallowing the evidence of what we'd witnessed. Danny was beside me, his face white with shock, his breathing ragged from the altitude and the fear. By the time we reached base camp, Webb's remaining students had already packed their equipment and were loading the trucks. They didn't ask about their professor. They didn't want to know. One of them, a young man named Peterson who had seemed so confident when they'd first arrived, was crying silently, tears freezing on his cheeks in the cold mountain air. The other, a woman named Martinez, had the 1,000-yard stare of someone who'd seen something that had broken part of her mind. I made them sign non-disclosure agreements that same day. Pulled out the forms we keep for exactly this situation. Forms my father had drafted, based on templates my grandfather had created, refined over 3 generations of managing secrets that couldn't be allowed to spread. I told them Webb had fallen into a crevasse during their research, told them his body couldn't be recovered. told them to forget everything they'd seen in that cave if they ever wanted to work in academia again. Told them that if they talked, I would personally ensure that every grant application they ever submitted was flagged for review. Every publication they attempted was scrutinized for fraud. Every job they applied for received anonymous tips about their mental stability. They agreed. They would have agreed to anything to get off that mountain and never come back. Peterson quit the program entirely. Martinez finished her degree but switched fields, moved to somewhere flat and warm and as far from mountains as she could get. I keep tabs on them both, the way my father taught me. So far, they've kept their silence. Danny was quiet during the hike down, quiet at base camp, quiet during the drive back to the ranger station. It wasn't until we were alone in my cabin that night, sitting by the fire with the journal open between us, that he finally spoke. "How long has the family known?" "Since 1952. Your great-grandfather was the first." "And the offerings? The solstice climb? That's what keeps it contained?" "That's what keeps it satisfied. Or at least, that's what we've always believed. The native tribes did something similar for thousands of years before we arrived. They understood that the mountain was alive, that it had an appetite, that it needed to be fed in a specific way to prevent it from feeding itself. Feeding itself how? Climbers, hikers, anyone who stays too long at the wrong elevation. I poured us both whiskey. We needed it. The offerings are... I don't fully understand what they are, honestly. A ritual my grandfather learned from a Shoshone elder. Symbols carved into ice. Words spoken in a language that might be older than any human tongue, and something left behind, something alive. Danny's eyes widened. Alive? You mean animals, deer usually, sometimes elk if I can get one. I bring them to the enclosure, that flat area near the summit of the Grand, and I leave them there. By morning they're gone, absorbed into the ice, added to the collection. And that's enough? That keeps it from taking people? Mostly, there are still accidents. People who go where they shouldn't, do things they shouldn't. But the mass disappearances stopped after my grandfather started the offerings. Before that, I opened the journal to an entry from 1931. Before that, entire climbing parties would vanish. Search teams would find nothing. No bodies, no equipment, no trace. The mountain was hungry, and it took what it wanted. Danny stared into the fire for a long time. The flames reflected in his eyes, dancing shadows across his young face. He looked older than his 19 years in that moment, older and more tired than anyone his age should look. I remembered looking exactly the same way when my father told me the truth, when the weight of the family burden first settled onto my shoulders. "What happens when you're too old to make the climb?" he asked finally. "What happens if you die before you can pass this on? What happens if you get absorbed like Webb or fall into a crevasse or just fail?" "Then you take over. That's why I've been training you. That's why you're here, working as a ranger instead of enjoying your gap year somewhere warm and safe." I put my hand on his shoulder, felt him trembling slightly beneath my palm. "I'm sorry, son. I know this isn't the life you imagined. I know you had plans, college, career, maybe a family somewhere far from these mountains, somewhere the winters don't last 8 months, and the peaks don't hunger for human flesh. But this is what we do," Danny said. It wasn't a question. "This is what we do. This is what Coles have always done, ever since your great-grandfather watched Robert Hendricks open his eyes in that hospital room and whisper about being kept alive inside the ice. We're the keepers, the feeders, the ones who make sure the mountain stays satisfied so it doesn't come down from the peaks and take what it wants. And if I say no, then I'll make the climb until I can't anymore. And when I'm gone, the offerings will stop, and the mountain will wake up hungry, and it will take everyone it can reach until someone else figures out how to put it back to sleep." I met his eyes. "But I don't think you'll say no. I think you felt it up there. The presence, the intelligence. You understand now that this isn't superstition. It's not tradition. It's survival." Danny was quiet for another long moment. Then he reached out and took the journal from my hands, opened it to the first page, where my grandfather had written the rules, read them slowly, carefully, the same way I'd read them when I was his age. "Show me," he said finally. "Show me everything. I need to be ready." That was 6 months ago. The winter solstice came and went. Danny made the climb with me, watched me perform the ritual, helped me carry the offering to the enclosure and leave it for the mountain. He saw it disappear into the ice. He heard the sound the mountain made when it was satisfied, a low, resonant hum that vibrated through the granite like a purr. He's ready now, or as ready as anyone can be for this kind of burden. Webb's disappearance was ruled an accident. His body was never recovered, officially because of unstable ice conditions, unofficially because there's nothing left to recover. He's part of the collection now, standing in that blue-lit cave with all the others, his eyes open, his mind absorbed into whatever vast intelligence lives inside the mountain. Sometimes I wonder if he's happy there, if any of them are happy. The mountain keeps them alive, after all, keeps them preserved, unchanged, frozen at the moment of their absorption. Their bodies don't age. Their cells don't decay. They exist in a state that's neither life nor death, but something in between, a kind of suspended animation that science can't explain and religion can't comfort. Maybe that's a kind of immortality. Maybe they're experiencing something we can't comprehend. A consciousness so vast and so alien that our individual identities seem like dreams it barely remembers. Maybe they're part of something larger now, something that has watched these mountains rise from the sea floor and will watch them erode back into sand. Maybe they've found a peace we can never know, or maybe they're screaming. Maybe they've been screaming for decades, for centuries, for millennia, their consciousness trapped in frozen flesh, aware of every second that passes, unable to move or speak or die. Maybe they feel every new addition to the collection, every climber who gets absorbed into the ice. Maybe they're begging for someone to destroy the mountain, shatter the glacier, set them free from their endless frozen prison. I try not to think about it too much. Some questions don't have answers that humans can survive knowing. If you ever visit Grand Teton National Park, enjoy the views. Take your photographs of the Tetons rising from Jackson Hole like something out of a postcard. Hike the trails around Jenny Lake. Watch the sunrise paint the peaks in shades of gold and rose. Marvel at the mountains rising from the valley like the spine of some sleeping giant, like the teeth of a god, like something that wasn't meant for human eyes but is beautiful anyway. But stay on the marked trails. Don't climb above 11,500 feet after dark. Don't explore any caves you find in the ice, no matter how inviting they look. And if you feel something watching you from the peaks, something ancient and patient and cold, something that has been collecting climbers since before your species had language, trust that feeling. Turn around. Go back to the lodge. Order a drink at the bar and tell yourself it was just the altitude, just the thin air playing tricks on your oxygen-starved brain, just your imagination running wild in the wilderness. Tell yourself whatever you need to sleep at night. That's what I do. The mountain is always hungry. It has been hungry since before humans existed, and it will be hungry long after we're gone. But as long as my family keeps making the offerings, as long as we keep performing the rituals, as long as we keep the old bargain alive and feed it what it needs, it will stay satisfied with what we give it. It won't come down from the peaks to take what it wants. It won't spread beyond its ancient boundaries. It won't absorb entire towns the way the native legends say it did before they learned to appease it. At least, that's what I tell myself every night before I go to sleep. Every night when I look out my cabin window at those jagged peaks silhouetted against the stars. Every night when I think about my son inheriting this burden and his children after him, an endless chain of coals stretching into a future I can barely imagine. Some nights, I almost believe it. Some nights, I lie awake until dawn, wondering what happens when the glaciers finally melt. Wondering what happens when the ice that keeps all those bodies frozen finally gives way. Wondering if the thing inside the mountain will release its collection, or absorb them completely, or wake up in a way that no offering can satisfy. I try not to think about it too much. Some questions don't have answers. Some burdens just have to be carried, generation after generation, until the weight finally crushes us, or the mountain finally takes us, or the world finally ends. Welcome to Grand Teton National Park. Enjoy your stay, and whatever you do, don't go looking for the ice caves. Some doors aren't meant to be opened, some secrets aren't meant to be found, and some mountains remember everyone who comes looking.